Many years ago, I had a friend of mine that was had his own insurance business, and I talked to him about getting some life insurance. We just had our first kid, and it just kind of seemed like the right thing to do to get some life insurance. And so, worked out getting a policy with him. He's like, "Yeah, you're going to have to go down to," I can't remember if it was in Springdale or Fayetteville. It was somewhere south of here. Go down to Springdale, Fayetteville, somewhere around there. You got to go through, get a physical. They got to do blood work and all this kind of stuff. And so, set the appointment for me. It was like on a Monday afternoon because at the time that was the day that I had off. It was on Mondays, so like no problem, got it. And so he's like, "Hey, just make sure that you don't eat anything beforehand because that'll mess with your blood work." Okay. And I'm like young in my 20s. There's no telling what it was that I ate on Sunday. But, on Monday, I did what he said to do. I didn't eat anything. But this is in the afternoon. And so I was almost out of gas. And so I pulled into an Easy Mart that was close to my house. And while I was pumping gas into my truck, went inside and got a giant Dr. Pepper, because I had at least one of those a day back in that time. And the whole way down, I'm just drinking on this Dr. Pepper the whole way to get all my blood work done for this life insurance policy. And when I saw my friend about a week later, we were getting together with a bunch of guys to play basketball. I was like, "Hey, hadn't heard anything about the life insurance thing yet." And he's like, "Yeah, your results came back, and we're not going to be able to do the policy that we thought we were going to be able to do." And I was like, "Why?" I felt like I was in pretty good shape. And he's like, "Just quick question. Have you ever been diagnosed with diabetes?" "No." He's like, "Is anybody in your family?" I'm like, "No, no, what? Never. That's never even been a consideration of mine." He's like, "Well, your blood sugar came back like way high." I'm like, "Oh, okay." He's like, "Did you eat stuff during the day or what? Like, did you eat?" And I was like, "No, I didn't eat. I did what you said to do. I didn't eat anything. All I did was drink Dr. Pepper on the way down there." And he's like, "There's a lot of sugar in Dr. Pepper, And so I was like, "Well, can I do this again?" So we had to set up an appointment again. And I didn't eat anything. I didn't even drink water because I was afraid that there was going to be something in the water that was going to mess with my blood results when I did that. And it wasn't that big a deal. It wasn't like I had this lifestyle, just this, awful things I was putting in my body. But, this little thing ended up causing a really big problem. That happens a lot in life, doesn't it? Something that seemingly is insignificant, something that seems like it's not that big a deal, ends up becoming a bigger problem for us. And so, again, the next time that I went, as much as I could, I fully detoxed, right? I abstained from everything until I got done. Now, I ate huge as soon as the blood work was done. I made up for it. But beforehand, I tried to detox myself. And Alex mentioned it in his communion thoughts just a minute ago. I did the same thing, Alex. I looked up the definition of detox, and there's a whole bunch of different definitions you can find. So I went with the Oxford definition, which says, or at least one of the things listed in the Oxford Dictionary is that detox is a process or period of time in which one abstains from or rids the body of toxic or unhealthy substances. So I've got things that are inside me that are not healthy, and I'm going to go through some kind of process of ridding those things, of getting those things out. There's something that's hurtful. There's something that if I don't do something about it, it's going to do some damage, or maybe damage has already been done. I'm trying to get that cleaned out. But I have to go through some kind of deliberate process. It doesn't just happen on its own. I make some choices, and I do some things, and I go through a process to flush out whatever it is that's in my system. I stop doing certain things. I start doing certain things. And there are, you guys know this, there are detox pills that you can take to clean out your system for whatever purpose. There are detox diets that you can go on for days, maybe even weeks at a time. I had a friend at one time that had found on the internet some kind of detox liquid substance. You take a bunch of cayenne pepper and lemon juice and a whole bunch of other things, and you put it on this pitcher, and you drink that for, a couple of days or whatever, and it's supposed to clean everything out, and I guess it's somewhat successful. We have processes like that. There are detox facilities to help people who have alcohol and drugs, in their systems, to get those toxins, those addictions, those substances out of their bodies. There's all sorts of methods, and there's all sorts of reasons why people go through physical detox times. But what about spiritual? What about a spiritual detox? What about the times when I need to clean out my spiritual self? What about going through some kind of deliberate process to get rid of the things that are polluting my relationship with God, that are damaging my faith, that maybe even damaging my soul? And I think for a lot of us, there's certain things that we would say, well, this isn't that big a deal. It's such a small thing. It's like drinking a Dr. Pepper on the way to get your blood work done. It seems insignificant. It seems like it's not that big a deal. And it may not be initially, but enough time spent in certain things can affect not just my physical body, but certain attitudes, certain relationships, certain things in my life that I allow to creep in begin to have negative impacts on my emotional health, my mental health, my spiritual health. And so that's what we want to talk about starting today is experiencing a cleaning out, a spiritual detox. And I think there's kind of a checklist for how to go about doing that, for looking at certain aspects of our life and recognizing, is there something here that I need to clean out? Is there something here that has become polluted, that has become corrupted in some way? And we find it in Mark chapter 12. And so if you got your Bibles with you, if you have a Bible app on your phone, feel free to turn to Mark chapter 12. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, those 4 books talk about the life of Jesus when he was here on this earth. And Mark tells the story of Jesus when he's teaching and preaching and sharing a bunch of different things. And one person who is an expert in all the things of the Old Testament, all the parts in the Bible before Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, comes up to Jesus and says to him, of all the commands in Scripture, of all the different things that are written, of all, and the culture that Jesus lived under that system of rules, that part of the Bible. Of all those things, Jesus, that we have learned since we were children, these are the rules. This is the checklist. This is what you need to obey. This is how you be the kind of person that God wants you to be. Of all the rules and regulations, which one's the greatest? Which one's the most important? And there were preachers and teachers and scholarly people in Jesus' day that would debate that question for hours on end. Of all the different laws, of all the different rules and regulations, which one's the most important? And they all had different opinions. And so he's asking Jesus that same question. And here's Jesus' answer in Mark chapter 12 and verse 30. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, with all your mind and with all your strength. Which is an amazing answer. But what I want us to see this morning is that, honestly, that's the checklist. When I'm looking at my spiritual health, when I'm looking at my relationship with God and my connection with God's people, and the things that matter most, not about my physical health, but my spiritual health, my eternal health, this provides a pretty good checklist for us. Because if something is polluting my heart, if something is corrupting my soul, if there's something that's controlling my mind, if there's something that is dictating how I use my strength and my talents and my abilities and my gifts, other than God, then there might be a detox that needs to take place. If my heart is clean, if my soul is pure, if my mind is clear, if I'm using my strength and my abilities that God has given me for pure godly purposes, then I'm going to be a spiritually healthy person. Not perfect. I'm still going to make mistakes. I'm still going to be flawed. There's still going to be times when I fall short. But I'm going to be a spiritually healthy person. And I believe that's also going to help me be an emotionally healthy person, maybe even a physically healthy person, if my spiritual health is where it should be. And so this is what we're talking about, starting this morning and going through the rest of this month of January. We're talking about spiritual detoxification, cleaning out our hearts, cleaning out our souls, cleaning out our minds, cleaning up how we use our strengths. And that's going to help us, I think, as we launch into this new year. Here we are at the beginning of 2024. As we launch into this new year, if I detox some of these things that may, over the last weeks, months, years, started to clog up and corrupt and pollute my spiritual health, maybe there's some things that I need to start cleaning out. So, let's talk about the first one this morning. Let's talk about detoxing my heart. What does that mean? What does that look like? How do I detox? How do I clean out my heart? And I think the first thing that we need to acknowledge is why it's even important in the first place. Why does it matter where my heart is? What are we talking about when we talk about my heart? Because I know there's some of us that have had physical heart issues, right? And if the heart isn't healthy, the rest of the body isn't healthy. Will we agree with that? You may have a lot of different physical issues that are going on in your body, and a lot of times those things can be connected to your heart. But if you got good heart health, you usually have pretty good, everything else health. Same is true for us spiritually. If our heart is healthy, there's a lot of other aspects of our spiritual life that is healthy as well. And we're not talking about the physical heart this morning. We're talking about the spiritual heart. What Scripture says is at the core of my emotions and my feelings and my values, the things that are most important to me. That's where my heart is. It's my heart that determines my actions. It's my heart that determines my goals and my direction in life. Jesus said it this way in Luke chapter 6 and verse 45. He said that the good man brings good things out of the good stored up where? In his heart. And the evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. What's inside of me, what is in my heart, what my heart is full of, is what produces my actions. It's what produces my words. It's what guides my attitude, good or bad. And so if I'm looking at my words that I use, and are those things kind of hurtful? Am I negative? Am I critical? Am I judgmental? Am I saying awful things to other people? Am I gossiping? That's not just my mouth, that's my heart. If I have a negative attitude, if I'm pessimistic, if I am constantly looking at the bad things, if I'm full of anxiety, that's not just a mental issue, that's my heart. If there's good things that are happening, if I feel like, man, I need to help somebody who needs help in this moment, if I feel like making good choices, if I have good values and good morals, that's my heart. That's at the center of those things. When my heart is good and when it's clean and when it's full of love for God and love for other people, then good things are produced. But if something else owns my heart, if there's something that is polluting and corrupting and taking hold of my heart, then problems are going to happen. I'm going to experience some hurt. I may cause some hurt in other people's lives because my heart's not healthy. So what are some of those things? What are the things that can pollute my heart? What are the things that can kind of, little by little, begin to corrupt things in my heart? I got a handful of things that I thought of. You could probably think of even more, but these are things that I think are probably more common for a lot of us. And one is my priorities, my to-do list, my schedules, my projects, the different activities that I sign up for, the different activities I sign my kids up for, the things that I choose to make the most important things in my life, the things that are at the top of my list. Those are the things that matter most to me. And those are things that can become toxic. Those are things that can become unhealthy. Those are things that can take control of my heart, little by little. And some of those things are good things in and of themselves. But if I get so focused on all the things I think I have to get done, and my schedule and my to-do list and my projects and all the different activities and being with all the people in all the social places that I want to be in, that can take over my heart. And it can end up causing problems. They can dominate my heart and cause me to make ungodly choices. My desires can be a problem. The things that I want, the things that other people have that I want for myself, the things that I look at that look like fun and look really pleasurable, but may be sinful or at least hurtful, the things that I lust after, the things that I crave for, those things can take over my heart. Those things can begin to corrupt and to pollute my heart, and in the process, determine my actions. I give into addictions, whether that's alcohol, drugs, porn, maybe even food. I give into those things. Why? Because I want it. I give into a physical, sexual affair. I give into an emotional affair with somebody I'm not married to. Why? Because I want it. I crave it. I give into more and more debt. I rack up more and more credit card debt that I can't pay off. Why? Because in the moment, I wanted it. I needed it. Had to have it. I get into gossip. Why? Because I want to know what's going on in everybody else's life. And I want to be the one to tell everybody else, because that's fun. The list could go on. The things that I want, the things that I crave, and maybe even try to justify and say they're not that big a deal. Those things, little by little, can corrode and corrupt my heart. Relationships can even be a problem. Relationships are good things, right? We're supposed to be connected with other people. And yet sometimes certain relationships can be bad for us. Maybe it's a dating relationship that is unhealthy. Maybe there's a family dynamic that isn't what it should be. Maybe there's a friendship that I'm holding on to and it's actually doing more hurt and harm than good. But those relationships can end up taking over my heart. I want so bad to date this person, or for them to keep dating me and not break up with me, that I'll start to compromise my values and my morals and even my time, so that I can hold on to that connection, that relationship, even if it's not healthy for me. I want so bad for this person or this group of people to accept me as a friend. I want to be friends with that person. I want to be in that group, and I want it so bad that I will allow that person to dominate my time, my schedule, and even allow them to impact what I believe about myself and how I see myself, how I define myself. It might even be a family member who may even mistreat me, or may say awful things to me, or may just cause me to feel guilty about different things that may or may not even be accurate. But I'm so convinced that I want this family relationship, or this relationship with this particular family member, that I just give in and believe whatever it is that they say and accept however it is they treat me, without setting any kind of boundaries to keep that from happening. And you see, we become so desperate to be in this particular relationship. We are so desperate to hold on to this particular connection that we'll do anything for it. That person ends up defining our actions, determining our attitudes, dictating what we focus on, where we spend our time. That can be a problem. That person ends up owning my heart. There's also just anxieties and doubts. I worry about getting sick. I worry about staying sick. I worry about the conflict that's happening all over the world. I worry about the conflict that's happening in our own country. I worry about the economy. I worry about my job. I worry about my physical health. I worry about my mental health. I worry about my family. I worry about certain friendships. I got all these different things that produce this anxiety. And I know I shouldn't worry. I mean, the Bible even says, don't worry, but that's easier said than done. I've got these things that I'm so I allow the fear to creep in. I allow the anxiety to creep in and to take hold. And that anxiety and that fear determines my attitude, and it determines my actions. Or maybe it's just those times when I'm not necessarily anxious. I'm just starting to doubt. I'm starting to doubt God's presence. Not even God's presence, God's existence. And if he really is there, and if he really does care, like the preacher says that he does, why don't I feel that in my life? And why do I feel abandoned? And why do I feel like everybody else is closer to God than I am? And I start to have doubts. And I allow those doubts to settle into my heart and to creep into my heart, and the doubt takes over. And it begins to impact my relationship with God. It begins to impact my faith. And my anxiety or my fear, my doubt, those things can take over my heart. The list could go on, right? I've just scratched the surface of different things that can take ownership of my heart. And if the heart is the center of how I feel and what I choose to do and how I choose to view the world around me and how I choose to act in this world around me, then the heart is a very vital organ, and there are certain things that I may have allowed to come in and corrode and corrupt my heart. And if that's the case, I need to clean that out. If there's something else that is in control of my heart and it's not God, there's a detox that needs to take place. There's a cleansing that needs to take place. So how do I do that? How do I start experiencing this detox in my heart? The first thing I got to do, honestly, is face up to it. I got to be honest about it. I need to acknowledge that there's a problem in the first place, and I need to confront the fact that I have heart issues, and to be honest about it. When it comes to physical health, I'll be honest with you right now. When it comes to my own personal physical health, I live in denial all the time. I'll start to get sick, and people are like, "Oh, you feeling bad?" Nah, fine. And I'm probably being contagious to other people, but I'll just go ahead and keep doing what I'm doing. So I'm like, I'm fine. I can get hurt. I can hurt my back. I can hurt my ankle. I can, like, different things. People are like, "Oh, you need to take it easy." Nah, I'm good. I'll be fine. And I don't know if it's just trying to act tough or trying just not to be a problem, or I don't know what's at the core of that. I just know that's something that I do with my physical body. Guess what? I do that spiritually too. I'm confessing to you, there are times when you have asked me, "Hey, you doing okay?" "Sure, fine." And there's all sorts of things going on inside of me that I'm not being honest with you about. We struggle with that, right? And it's not just not being honest with each other. We're not always honest with ourselves. And this is where the heart detox needs to start. I need to acknowledge, man, there is something or someone that has taken over my heart and it's causing problems. And until I'm willing to be honest about that, until I'm willing to face up to that, I'm going to continue to have the problem. There's a story in the Old Testament, the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 11 and 12, by a guy named David. And this church family has talked about this story before, and so I won't go through a lot of details, but if you've never heard that story before, I invite you to write it down right now, put it in your phones, read it later. 2 Samuel, chapter 11 and chapter 12. There's this guy named David, and everything was going great for David. He's the king of Israel, and he was winning battles, and everybody loved him, and everything was great, until one day he is supposed to be out to war, but he's not. He's walking around on the roof of his palace, and he looks down, and he sees a woman, Bathsheba, taking a bath, and he's like, "Man, that's what I want right now." And he invites her to the palace, and he ends up bringing her inside and having sex with her, and he gets her pregnant. He doesn't know at the time that she's pregnant, but he sends her home, and then he gets word after that, "Hey, I'm pregnant, and this child is yours." And so he wants to cover that up. He doesn't want people to know that he's had an affair. He doesn't want people to know that he's impregnated, oh, by the way, somebody else's wife. And so her husband is off fighting the battle for David that David should be at. But David invites her husband Uriah back to the palace, thinking that he'll go home and see his wife. They'll end up having sex, and then everybody will think, "Oh, this is Uriah's kid." But Uriah won't go home. And so David hatches another plan. And he sends a message back to the leader of his army. "Hey, what I want you to do is put Uriah, the soldier, on the front lines, and then withdraw everybody else from him. That way, he'll be sure to die." And he sends that message back with Uriah. Uriah gives the hidden message, the secret message to the commander of the army. The commander of the army reads it and follows the orders. Puts Uriah at the front. All the other soldiers draw back during this battle, and Uriah is killed. And David thinks, "Phew, got him out of the way." Brings Bathsheba, this now widow, to the palace, marries her real quick, and then lo and behold, we got pregnant really fast. And she has this baby. And David thinks everything's fine. Nobody knows. We're all good. There's lots of different problems that were going on in David's heart through this whole process. He's had lust. He's committed an affair. Not taking responsibility for it. Committed murder. Lied about the whole thing. And is pretending that nothing's wrong. There's a lot of different issues going on in David's heart, aren't there? The one thing that David is not doing throughout this whole process is looking in the mirror and going, "Hey, there's a problem here." And it took somebody else to actually do that for him. That's where 2 Samuel chapter 12 comes in, where David's friend, who is also a prophet named Nathan, comes and confronts him. "David, you messed up. You have sinned in a colossal way. And you may think that nobody knows, but people know. Not only that, God knows. You've done an awful thing. And when David is confronted, when he faces up to all the different things that he's done, it begins to have an impact. Here's how he words it in Psalms, in the book of Psalms, in chapter 51. After he's confronted with this whole situation, that's what Psalm 51 is all about. This is a song, this poem that David wrote in response to being presented with all the awful choices he's been making. And in verse 3, I love the way that one of our translations says this. I want to share it with you this morning. David says, I know how bad I've been. My sins are staring me down. That's brutally honest. But that's where David needed to start. That's where I need to start. If I've got heart issues, spiritual heart issues, first thing I need to do is to face up to it. And sometimes that can be me just recognizing on my own, there's a problem. There's a problem in my heart and it's causing other problems in my life and I need to do something with it. And sometimes I don't see it or I'm choosing not to and I need somebody that I can trust who can step into my life and go, hey, I love you, but look at what you're doing. Look at your relationship with God right now. Look at the choices that you're making. I need either me or somebody else that I trust and that I love and that loves me to confront me so I can face up to it. Here's my question for you this morning. If I can say this in the least guilt-inducing way as possible. Do I know how bad I've been? David says, I know, I recognize it, I see it. I know how bad I've been. Can I say that about myself? Do I know how bad I've been? And do I recognize, I think is a good way to maybe reword this. Do I recognize how bad things have gotten? Do I recognize how distant I have become from God? Do I recognize that there is something else in control of my heart besides Him? Do I even see it? Because that's where David's at. I see it. I see the problem. I'm facing up to it. That's where we start. Second thing I got to do is got to own it. And I know that sounds similar to facing up to it, but it takes it a step further. Because I can face up to the problem. I can recognize there's a problem in my life. There's some choices that I'm making that I shouldn't be making. There's some things that I should be doing that I'm not. And whatever the reason for that is, it's ultimately a heart issue, and that's a problem. I acknowledge it, and then I can go on my merry way and do nothing about it. Yeah, I see there's a problem. Yeah, it's a problem. And maybe I even recognize it's a problem, but I'm going to come up with all sorts of reasons why it's a problem. And I'm going to point the finger and go, yeah, okay, but, the kind of house that I was brought up in, this is a problem, but do you know how they treat me at work? Do you know the words that she said to me? Do you know how he treated me? And we'll point the fingers and blame other people. And we'll say, this is the reason why, or that's the reason why, or here's the reason why I'm making these choices. Here's my excuse for why this has started to creep in and take control of my heart. And I'm not owning it. We go back to David again, this situation with Bathsheba. We looked at Psalm 51, verse 3. Look at what he says in the very next verse, in verse 4. He's talking to God, and he says, against you only have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight. So you're right in your verdict and justified when you judge. Look at what David is saying here. David could say, when Nathan said, hey man, you've had an affair, you got somebody pregnant, you killed her husband, you lied about it and you're pretending everything is fine. And David could have said, okay, that's true, but do you know how hard it is to be the king? You know what? She shouldn't have been on her roof taking a bath in the first place. That's her fault. If Uriah had just gone home when I told him to, we wouldn't have to worry about this. There's all sorts of things that David could have said and all sorts of reasons that he could have given for why he was having the problem that he was having. To face up to the problem and say, yeah, it's a problem, but here's all these reasons why. David doesn't do that. What does he say? I'm the one who sinned. This has been my choice. These have been my actions. God, you're right. I did this. You see the difference? I need to face up to whatever the the thing is, the toxin, the poisonous thing that has taken ownership in my heart. But I also need to own what I have done to allow it there in the first place. And own the actions that I've taken because of it. So I face up to it, I own it, and then I got to get rid of it. I got to get that toxin, that thing out of my life. I need to take action. I need to do something different, maybe even something drastic to make a significant change, to clean this thing out. I mean, if you go through and whether it's a physical detox that we go through, or going, like I said, some people go to a facility to work on the addiction and get the different toxins of different, chemicals and drugs and alcohol they put in their bodies to detox from those kinds of things. When you do that, I mean, there's a process that you go through to get rid of those things, to not have them around anymore. I am cleaning these things out. I am getting rid of whatever it is that has been causing this problem. And it does no good for me to face up to it and say, yeah, there's a problem, and to own it and say, yeah, I made those choices, and then keep holding on to the thing that continues to hold on to my heart. I've got to clean that out. Jesus said it this way. He said it in really almost harsh language. Matthew chapter 9, verse 43 through 47, he says, if your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. Later on, he says, your foot caused you to stumble, cut it off. Later on, he says, if your eye caused you to stumble, pluck it out. That's pretty direct, isn't it? Now, I really don't believe that Jesus is talking about us walking around lopping off body parts. I believe that Jesus is saying you need to get real and get serious and actually do something, and do something significant, maybe even seemingly to the rest of the world, drastic, to get rid of whatever this thing is that has ownership of your heart. And that's the question, isn't it? Am I willing to actually get rid of the toxin? Whatever it is that's corrupting and polluting my heart. Am I willing to go to rehab? Am I willing to go to therapy and to counseling? Am I willing to cut up credit cards? Am I willing to put some kind of a lock or something on my computer and my phone so I don't go to certain sites? Am I willing to break up with this person in this relationship because this isn't healthy? Am I willing to either walk away from this friendship, this relationship, or at least put up some boundaries? Am I willing to have a hard conversation with a particular family member about how things are going to have to be different from now on? Am I willing to do those things? Am I willing to actually flush out this toxin? Because the habit, the desire, the object, this person, whatever it is that is feeding this toxic thing in my heart is going to continue to be there until I choose to clean it out in a significant way. And then finally, I've got to let God give me a clean heart. Ultimately, I've got to let Him go in and clean all that out. Going back to David's situation one more time. We've looked in Psalm 51 where he's faced up to the problem. He's owned it. There's a willingness on his part to do something different, to make a significant change. But he needs something else. And it's in Psalm 51 verse 10. And it's words that we've already sung them in a song this morning. Where David calls out to God, cries out to God and says, God, create in me a pure heart. Clean this out. Of all the things, I mean, I'm struggling right now with lying and with lust and with covering things up. Maybe even my own pride, my own arrogance for thinking that I'm untouchable and nothing could go wrong for me. I'm struggling with all these things. But with all these different struggles, God, I recognize here's the problem. It's my heart. And I see it and I own it and I want something to be different. But God, it's got to start with you. Can you clean this out? Will you clean this out? And that's what God's willing to do. For those of us who have never had a relationship with God before, we've never given our lives to Jesus Christ, that's the reason that He came. That's why He died on the cross. That's why He rose again, was to be able to clean out all the junk in our lives, especially in our hearts. So when we believe that story to be true, when we confess His name and confess Him to be the Lord of our lives and the Lord of our hearts instead of anything else, And we repent of all those different choices. We say no to all the things that we used to say yes to. And we are baptized in his name. We are covered in his blood. We are filled with his spirit. In that moment, God cleans everything out. It's gone. The sin, the guilt, all that is gone. From the inside out, I am clean. Isn't that awesome? That's what our God is willing to do for us. And if I've been through that process before, if I've given my life to Jesus, but if I've allowed certain toxins to creep back in, habits, relationships, addictions, attitudes, whatever it is, I've still got a God that says, I can clean that out. John says in 1 John chapter 1 and verse 9, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and purify us from how much unrighteousness? You can say it out loud. You're allowed to. How much unrighteousness? All of it. All of it. My God has the power and the desire to clean this out. And he'll do it. And he'll do it again and again and again. I just need to let him do it. That takes some surrender on my part. That takes some humility and vulnerability on my part. To ask and to allow it to happen. But if I will face up to what's taking control of my heart, and if I own it, and if I choose to do something different about it, and I ask God to forgive it and to clean it up, that's where the detox starts. That's how I start to clean things out of my heart. And that's where some of us need to be today. There are things in 2023, there are things in the last week, there are things in the last couple months that have taken over our hearts. But we have a God that's willing to clean all that up because he loves us that much. I had some friends years ago who had I can't remember what kind of little food shop in the food court down at the mall in Fayetteville. And they had a Coke machine there, fountain drinks, the Coke machine. And they told me about one of the worst jobs in that place. Like, they didn't like doing it, and none of their employees liked doing it. They even had to schedule out who does it every single time because nobody wanted to do it. Because you got this Coke machine, and you got the tray at the bottom of the Coke machine, right, that collects all the excess. So you put your cup under there, and when you pull your cup away, there's still stuff dripping sometimes, And so there's a tray that collects all that. Well, there was a tube at the bottom of that tray that would, collect all that, and it drained down into whatever container they had to get rid of it. But that tube itself eventually would get clogged up. And Coke syrup and stuff would start to come back up the tube, back into the tray. And they realized, okay, we got to clean out the Coke tube. And nobody wanted to do that. Because you had to unhook this thing, and you had to take this tube, and you had to just push and work and get this Coke syrup snake that would come out of this tube as you're pushing all this stuff out of it. And it was tedious, and it was difficult, and it reeked. It's just gross. You end up having all this Coke syrup all over your hands. It's just nasty. Nobody wanted to do it. But the thing was, it wasn't like an everyday thing. That tube got clogged up little by little by little. A few drops here, a few drops there, a few drops more, a few drops more. And pretty soon that thing was completely clogged and had to be cleaned out. My guess is if you're sitting here this morning, if you're joining us online this morning, you recognize, man, there is something that has corrupted my heart. It has filled my heart, and it's not of God. My guess is that didn't happen overnight. It happened little by little. A choice here, some words there, an attitude here, a compromise there. And little by little it took over. And it may be a little bit painful to clean that out. And it may be difficult, and it may take some effort. But we have a God that can do that and wants to do that for us and with us. And you have a church family here that will help in any way we can to clean out whatever has polluted our hearts. So let us help with that. We're going to stand together in just a second. We're going to sing a song together. when we stand and as we're singing, if you recognize there is something that is taking over my heart and I want it out of there and I'm just not sure how to go about doing that or not sure that I can do that, you are more than welcome to come to the front. I know that's awkward for some of us. Just come to the front and say, I'm ready for a clean heart, a new heart. And we can help make that happen through the power of our God this morning. And if you don't come to the front today, but you know there's something that needs to be different, would you be willing to come find me after worship, one of our shepherds, maybe even the person sitting next to you, and just say, I've got some things that are taking over my heart, and I don't know what to do, but I need some help. Just share that with us. You are sitting amongst a bunch of people who constantly need heart detoxes, and we want to help you if we can. So come forward if you need to, while together we stand and sing.